Harriet and Wilson.
Harriet and Wilson. Bob Kluttz.
Maria Allen. Thanks for coming here, folks. Wow, we gotta get rid of that. So can we undo the reverb?
That is unfortunately
Just
they were $40.
You'll have to sing everything, Bob.
Jordan cut you up, bigger budget.
Yeah.
Okay, today we have with us Harriet McDougal. Scheduled to be a panel just to talk about the life and times of Jim Rigney. And we have some additional guests, Maria Simmons and Alan Romanczuk. Sorry. And I'm hoping that we will have an additional guest here in the next few minutes.
No, you may come in at the very end of the program.
Okay, well, we'll move from here. So we got a few bad questions, and I'm sure we'll incorporate them along the way. And I want to say maybe about 15 minutes at the end for folks to ask individual questions. But right now, I think it's just a story time. So maybe starting earlier rather than later. Wilson, what was it like growing up with Jim Rigney?
Frightening. Jim was, he was always a bit of an imposing figure.
Is he a little bit older or younger than you?
He was 4 years my senior. Now, if you can, okay, I'm looking around for gray hair in the room. If you can remember when you were about 11, looking at a 15-year-old, they were an adult, okay? And not only was he an adult when he was about that age to me, he was intimidating to the adults around too, which I found rather fascinating. This was the guy I wanted to grow up to be like. It was like, oh my gosh, if I can be like that. Well, not only that, but he was my height at the time. Oh, by the way, side story. Great sense of humor. All right, we're standing in the dining room not too long ago, and he says, "You're 6'3". And I said something about being 6'2", and he said, because my son is 6'5". Right? Okay. Yeah. He said, "You're 6'3". You're not 6'2". I said, I've always been 6'2". He said, "I'm 6'2", and you're an inch taller than me." Okay, I'm 6'3". Not behaving. But he was, even as a youth, he was a pretty large guy. And when I went off to the universities, I was 6'2", 145 pounds. So he was pretty intimidating character, even as a youth. Nobody pushed Jim Rigney around. He was, even in that day, he was a voracious reader. Harriet, who found her mate, works and works all day long, and ask her what she does to relax in the evening.
I read.
After reading all day for work, but she relaxes by reading. Well, Jim did that too as a youth, and I would go into his bedroom, and there were stacks, chock-a-block full. You couldn't get around in his bedroom for all of the stuff. As a child, he would sneak down the street to this little supermarket and crawl into the books and start reading. And he was about 4 and 5. He was very early on. And our grandfather got all over him once about, "Lad, you know you're supposed to pay for that." And the owner of the store said, "It's okay. He's fine. He's welcome." Yes.
So when we got engaged, Jim said, "I think I should get you a ring." And I said, "Well, honey, I have a ring, which had been left me by my mother." And I said, "What I think I need, since you're moving in with 5,000 books, could I have some engagement bookcases?" And he did that. And they got much, they were absolutely full out in about 3 weeks. So then it was back to stacks of books, which
Because
Maria could talk
the
about.
library got to how many volumes, Maria, that you had to catalog?
The library was about 15,000 books. I started cataloging. I made up my own system, which librarians have been very kind not to laugh about. And started cataloging, it would have been back in summer of 96, I think. And I thought I was going to work my way out of a job by finishing cataloging. But he was buying way more books than I could keep up with. So after cataloging about 6,000 books, I got an assistant and turned that over, and it just kept going and going.
The Wilson, fourth and three, can you tell us the story of that?
Actually, that's something that Jim laid on me. We had always had some sort of bond, even when we were youth. And of course, again, that 4-year difference, by the time I was coming somewhat into manhood, he was heading off in the military. So he became Fable at that point. And we actually lost touch for a significant period of time. But we were always close. And it was later on in manhood when we got together that he actually vocalized the brother first. But that can't quite be because there were 3 Rigney brothers, one who was significantly older than the other 2, and me sort of fitting there along with them. So he coined the moniker fourth of 3 brothers. So I coined the phrase brother cousin.
Okay.
Stealing from his books, of course.
You're actually a first cousin.
I am a first cousin. His mother and my father, brother and sister, and how their parents met was my father and his father were serving together during World War II, and now we're home, being, if you will, getting out of the military, but they had a little bit of time, and they were about to hit the town, which, when they hit the town, and the police would be involved. And my grandfather was a policeman at the time, and he would get calls like, that would start with, Pat, your son is downtown tearing up things again. What are you going to do about it? That was my dad. But so at any rate, so they go to the house, my grandparents' house, and Aunt Eva is helping grandmother trim the Christmas tree at that time of the year. And my dad excuses himself to do something, and they get ready to leave to go back out on the town, and Uncle Jimmy says, I think I'll stay here. And he said there was something about that girl in that chair with those Christmas ornaments, and that's how they met. So, yeah, we've sort of been connected even before the connection.
It's a great story. So, we've heard many times about the influence of his war experience on Jim's life. What other experiences reflect in his writing from earlier in his life?
I'll throw that one to you.
Well, he used everything. Like a person making a patchwork quilt. I don't know whether you've ever considered, well, no, I won't tell you.
Read and find out.
But it seems to me that the people of the 2 rivers, the Coplings and all, there are a strong resemblance to the people that Jim grew up among outside of Charleston. They began in the city, they were living in the city of Charleston, and they moved to a house that they built with their own hands on the Maybank Highway. Who is it who goes to Edisto? Anyway, it's a rural road, and was even more rural then. And I can sort of see the Coplings and all hanging around. There were no sheep. But his grandfather, your grandfather's farm, still had mules on it. And
Daisy.
Daisy?
Not that I know her name.
And Jim was very much expected to work, the farm.
Yes.
So when he talks about farm boys, he knew what he was talking about. And he did talk, he had a very southern kind of way of speaking. And he would say of someone who just looked exhausted, man, she's been rode hard and put away wet. Of course, being a horse and not being cared for properly at the end of a hard day. Anyway.
Excuse me, could you project your voice a little, maybe toward the
Sure.
back of the room? I can't hear you too well.
Okay, is
There's some
this
seat
wretched
available
thing
up
not
here in the
working?
front too, if people want to come forward and just
Yeah.
smack her, feel free.
Hello. Let me just be louder. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
All right.
Harriet, who was that wild boy Will Conger in the books fashioned after?
Maybe?
I've been known to be a prankster at times. Yeah, I think he takes a little bit from everything that he puts in the books. Yeah, he took from our lives there. Back to the story on the farm, I remember, okay, I'll tell you a redneck story. Because it involves him skinning a deer. But it didn't involve a deer hunt. It involved 55 Chevy and a deer that got in the way. And I wasn't driving, I was too young at the time, but my father, who had slowed down because the real driver who was sitting next to him called my mother, was going, "Bill, slow down, slow down." And he committed suicide against our front left light. And so much so we were slowed down that he was right behind the trunk of the car when we stopped. And I don't know how he ended up in the trunk, but there he was. So we get to the farm out on John's Island, and you know, I've got the fondest memory of Jim just grabbing the deer out of the trunk, and we slung him up. And I kind of knew what to do because I was a country boy, but he had a knife out and was skinning deer before I could even say, you know, jackrabbit. He was, and if I could dig up the picture, and where's Hunter, and I'll apologize because that picture I have somewhere of him standing with it, with his barrel chest up, you know, and he's got this skinned deer behind him hung in the tree.
Hey, I eat venison and I think it's very tasty.
But this was fresh roadkill, we saw it happen.
Well, a cousin of mine has a son in Philadelphia, of all places, where she was fed some fresh roadkill and she said it was delicious. Another deer who had committed harakiri. Gosh, I had to thought, oh yes, Jim talked often about a man named Junior Terry. Did you ever meet him?
The name is familiar. but
Junior
no.
Terry was apparently a low character who almost lived in the woods. He was a hunter and fisher, and Jim would steal his father's ammunition and take it to Junior Terry. And in return, Junior Terry would show him woodcraft, and he loved that. And I think he felt very grown up out in the woods with this guy doing big guy things. He had many tales about that, And he used to get the Cabela's catalog for years and years. And one Christmas, he became increasingly hard to buy Christmas presents for, obviously. And one year, Will and I were looking through this. We'd already given him nunchucks and you name it, anything exotic. And I said, "Look, Will, look at this patch." And the patch said, "Happiness is a large gut pile." You didn't think that was so fun. And then later, Marcia, who has been working with Alan and Maria and me for a long time, we had a fish pond that we built in the mid-90s, and I put in almost 100 goldfish from Walmart, I hasten to say, but they kept vanishing. And then we figured out it was a great heron. It was dropping in, and he was such a pig. He was one. It emptied the pool. So, and Jim said, "Oh, Cabela's is selling meat-fed fox urine. We'll get Marcia to go out there and sprinkle it around the fish pond, and that will keep the heron away." And I told this to Tom Doherty, he's usually almost totally unflappable, but his eyes opened very wide. And he said, "And she didn't quit?" It didn't work either. Fortunately for Marcia, she didn't have to do it long.
It did have an interesting aroma.
I have one more question about Jim growing up. Before that, I'll forget this if I don't ask it. One of the pictures that we saw of Jim's study, there was a life-size skeleton. And
Oh, yeah.
was that plastic?
Yes. What did you tell him about if he bought the real thing?
Well, yes, we were in Maxilla and Mandible in New York. It's up near the Natural History Museum. And if you ever want to go, it's a marvelous place. And Jim began fiddling with a real skeleton, checking it out. He said, "Honey, don't do that." I said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because if you buy a real skeleton, I'll bury it." And he looked at me and so I meant it. It is plastic.
There's a saber-toothed tiger head, there's a gator head, there's a...
The biggest lobster claw you ever saw.
Oh, yeah. There's snakes, there's...
A tarantula. Yeah.
Oh. If you go into the arbory, as we love to call it, you just didn't want to like put your hands in odd places. Jason got in there and went, "Oh my."
Or you don't want to sneeze or everything's going to come falling on you.
There were bladed weapons of every sort, shape, size imaginable in there. It was a bit scary. And I know we're going to have a class later on sword forms. And every once in a while, Bubba would be, he would collect, who said research? Who got to say that in the skit? Okay, research, your video games. Well, he collected them
Research.
as research.
Yes, absolutely.
And lovely Harriet would say, ICHBS. Now, that went on for years
Yes.
before I finally said, what is this ICHBS? Because she would just let him collect all this stuff. And it was?
It could have been stewardesses.
So they just kept appearing, all these things,
And including a couple of Japanese practice swords, which are wood. And there
Which
was
are?
a wonderful moment when he was writing Conan, when I walked into his, at that point we were sharing office space. That's before the books took over. I mean, the books he bought, and anyway, I walked in, and he was sitting behind the desk. I was working out a battle scene. I said, "Oh, good." But he did. And he liked very much to write Dakota music.
But-
I had periods of thinking, if I have to listen to one more piece of Koto music, I think my brain will explode. And of course now I wish I could listen all day long. Yeah.
But you asked about the experiences,
And
but he
Lady
would use
spent Black Mombasa.
he would use the blades to get a feel. So what he wrote about the blades, he would touch and feel and do. Okay. And there were times that he would be showing me something. Now, at his grandiose-est, he was 360,
No.
340.
340.
340. I'm a pretty big guy at 225. He made me look little. He was pretty intimidating. And now he's over you with a sword showing you this. That's about there. confines of the small little armory, and I go, oh, please don't tell me.
Jen had 54-inch shoulders.
Oh, huge, huge. There was, and I'll tell a little on, in the same vein, I'll tell on my daughter Marissa, because we were there. Jim would love to fish. You know, some of you have heard that, and that was something that he and I shared in common. I'm not such a fisherman, but boy, I love spending time with him, and that meant we could get in the boat and get away. And did I ask him about the books or the work? Not on your life. It was the one time he could escape, so we would just go and talk about fish. But in that regard, we were there on a fishing trip, and the weather was too bad, so we ended up sitting around in the den watching Braveheart. Now, fast forward a lot of years later, and some of you have considered, why did we release some of the collection? Well, there were a lot of reasons. And when I was telling my family around the dining room table that we were going to do this, Marissa says, now, how long ago was the fishing trip?
Oh, that was when I was at high school age. So
15
10,
years
no,
ago?
10, 15, yeah, getting up, yeah, now getting there.
Yeah, 15, 16 years ago. And she says, you're not going to sell the
Yeah.
Claymore.
That's
You know what a
Braveheart
Claymore
sword,
is?
yeah.
Well, immediately following Braveheart,
Yeah.
Jim takes her out, the 14, 15-year-old girl that she was, takes her out to the armory. Have you ever seen a Claymore?
Oh, that
Marissa
thing. It's
has
great.
it in her
Love it.
possession now.
That thing's great. It comes up here. I love
It's
it.
a two-handed,
It's
two-handed
wonderful.
broadsword that you would wear across your back, right? And he's out there teaching her sword.
Yeah. It's great.
He did what?
So. He did.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Because one of the things that I've been dying to ask about, one of the themes in the Wheel of Time is strong women. And whenever asked about that, he said, everybody I grew up with was like that, so tell us about the strong Rigney women.
Well, I think the strongest of them was sitting at the table with me. You're most welcome. Actually, I'll tell a story on both of us, because my childhood nickname ended up as a village drunk in one of these stories someplace. And some of you might notice that Harriet has a distinctive hair coloring, and that there was one of the sisters who had the same. And she wasn't necessarily a nice sister, was she? Okay. So I lean in close to Harriet very quietly one day and asked her what she thought of the fact that he had made me the village drunk, and her this evil Aes Sedai. And she said something to me that curdled my blood. Right? Literally. She just looked at me and winked and said, honey, what you don't understand is I'm all of them.
Well, that's what Jim said. And he said, well, when I come in the evening and Harriet looks at me and says, you forgot to put the garbage out. He said, there's Mulgarian. So that's what he said.
Yes.
It was very flattering. And it's true, when he came in the house in the evening, I could tell when he'd been writing somebody evil, because he'd come in the back door into the kitchen, and he'd close the door and come back up against it, and then he'd sidle around the walls. And I remember early on, I said, you've been writing Pad and Fane today, haven't you? He said, how did you know?
Put him down, leave him back there. So
Shed him down.
he did take to doing that, though. At the end of his writing day, is Brandon in the room? Because there's a.
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay, good. He's out writing, please.
Yes.
Because the guys who do this, and any of the writers that are in the room, know that you do it because you enjoy it, and you don't really think of it as work. And Jim never did. He never knew what day it was. Sometimes he didn't know what time it was. You know, Maria will tell you that. I mean, he'd get in the middle of the work and he'd forget to eat. You know.
I want to tell a little story here. When I first started working for Jim, I was hired to answer fan mail. and I was working 12 hours a week. I would go in 2 evenings, like from 4 to 7. And so I would get there, and at some point, he would decide to go in the house to have dinner. He would totally forget I was there, set the alarm. As soon as I stepped out of my office, the alarm goes off, the police come. It happened more than once. And maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to. And it's a really good thing the bathroom door had a lock. He would totally forget I was there.
And you forgave him these things.
Yes. As long as he kept writing.
Amazing person.
So how was he as a boss?
He was a fabulous boss. If I screwed something up, he didn't yell and scream. He would look at me and say, "Okay, fix it." And that was it. As long as I fixed it, no harm, no foul. Really early on one day, I was running an errand in Harriet's car, and I was pulling back in the driveway, and a dog ran across near these gates. And I passed the gates, and the entire side of Harriet's BMW had a huge white streak on it. And I started to park the car and leave town. I said, "No, I didn't know y'all as well then, and Jim was intimidating." So I was like, "No, I've got to go." And so Jim wasn't in the office, so I went in the house, and he was sitting right in the kitchen. And I said, "Jim, I just ran Harriet's car to the gate, and it's all white on one side." And he just looked up at me and said, "Yeah, that happens a lot." "We'll fix it, but you've got to tell Harriet." So I crept up the stairs, and I'm thinking, oh God, this is her car. If somebody wrecked my car, I'd be so mad. So I said, "Harriet, I messed up your car. A little dog ran across," and she burst out laughing and said, "Everybody hits the gate."
The gates had a bas-relief carving of the dragon on them, and they're otherwise big white wooden gates, and they have been called by some people the curse of the white dragon. And
They have to be repainted frequently.
yes.
I put them in my own car twice.
So what brought Alan aboard was that you loved the books too. And Alan has inherited the unenviable task of being the IT officer, which means I call him and say, "Alan, I can't find anything in my email." I've got great files, but I forget which file I put things in. And he was doing it this week.
Well, it also means when the light bulb goes out, I'm
Yeah.
called, because anything electrical is
And that brings up a point. I've heard third-hand rumor that there are computer gremlins in the house.
Very likely, but I haven't found them yet.
That's why they're still there.
Alan, was that your comment?
No, that was yours.
Oh,
We're asking
okay.
about the gremlins.
Okay.
Cockroaches, yes.
Cockroaches.
But I don't think we've had gremlins. Alan makes them
gremlins.
go away.
Yeah.
Is that a teaser for the next book?
No. Well, we did have a plague of cockroaches last year. These are the big South Carolina ones.
And they were
That big.
They infested the attic of the big house where Jim and I live, and in the back it was just unbelievably disgusting.
sitting at my desk. They were crawling across my feet.
Oh yeah, it was bad. And in the attic of the big house, they were up in the attic. I had a house guest, an opera singer, who was in town for the Spoleto Festival, and some board member had put out a help. We don't have any place to put the artists. And I said, okay, I'll take whatever you send me. And he was a dear guy, British opera singer, performs all over the world. And he said he was woken up because things were whirring over his head. So as an opera singer, he could do the noise of little cockroach wings perfectly. And he turned on the light and there was just a cloud of them. He said, not to worry, I've been in Madagascar where they're much bigger than these. I said, my God, Brian, they must be the size of dachshunds. He said, almost. So I got a can of, I don't know what, bug juice. You know, so he could sleep at night when he was woken up. He could kill them all. And Orkin said, well, it's a pity it got this far. We weren't here early enough to prevent this. I said, you've been coming once a month for 7 years. So anyway, it was awful. And Maria did, at my request, write a lovely, long, detailed description.
Oh my.
Except Brandon.
That's not a spoiler, but there may be cockroaches.
And they're much better in books than in
Yes.
person.
Oh, and there is an IT story about that as well. There's a little man who rents the carriage house, which is adjoining the carriage house we work in. And he asked me one day, since I build computers and fix them, if I would look at his computer. It's running slowly. And I opened it up, and sure enough, it was a home of a coven of roaches.
Oh my!
And,
So you debugged the machine?
I did. And he's now the proud owner of a Mac Mini.
Did you know that's the origin of the phrase? You know the story of a woman naval officer. The great big mainframe wasn't working. This is what, about 1950? And she was small, so we sent her. She went into the machine to see what was happening. She found a dead moth. Pulled it out, the machine worked again. She debugged it. Ended her career in the Navy as a rear admiral. A nice feminist twist.
Back to Jim writing for a second, though, because she would get upset at him coming in the house still wearing one of the, evil people out of the books or whomever. He actually, and I guess a few of us have done this too, although most of our IT departments have, probably Alan too, have made this impossible. He would take to playing blackjack solitaire for about 30 minutes at the end of the workday. And that would just, if he just played with the cards, it got his mind out of the world long enough that now he could be Jim Rigney when he went back into the house. Yeah, my IT department made that impossible too.
Oh!
All right.
Bad
I
idea.
did.
Yeah.
I was made to upgrade it.
Another thing about his writing habits, he didn't doodle. Really, even when he was working on paper in the beginning, it was something he was fond of doing. But he kept 2 grip exercises on his desk. One made for trumpet players, and one made for pistol shots. And this is how he managed to sign all those books so fast. Because that's what his relaxation was. He'd sit there doing his grip stuff when he wanted to sit back and think. And some people just, gosh, the Poisonwood Bible, I'm probably going to blank on her name. Yeah, she had to stop signing on one book tour because her hand hurt so much.
The other thing that helped save it was the sensor pens, the ones with the
Yes.
little gel
Yeah, he loved
piece down at
those.
the end. Used it once I-
I've got a fan question for you, Harriet. Jim always said there was a little bit of you in every character. Which character do you think there's the most of you that you're the most like?
I would guess maybe Bielaczyc and I would love a little live owl to sit on my desk. And I can see myself walking into a room and through ankle-deep blood, ignoring the severed head on the table to decipher the writing on the wall. It was distinct. How about you, Maria? Who would you be?
Who would I be? I don't know. I would be a brown.
You would be a brown.
I would be a brown, yeah, because, you know, sitting with my books, doing this.
We're both bookish. And I will tell you, Maria did have, and you may still have, she had on her desk a plastic iguana about this long, which had a cigarette dangling under his jaw.
It's in the window now.
It's in the
There's
window.
no room
Having
for
a
desk.
view. Yeah.
On the book.
Alan?
Alan is more sedate.
Do you still have those balls, Jesse?
Alan has been, I mean, he would give you a list of questions when he was writing. Some where so-and-so and so-and-so are talking, and I mean the exact form of words that one of them says to the other, and Alan would find this. And Jim was sometimes off by as much as a book, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'd get sometimes 20, 30 pages of questions for him to respond to relating to what he was writing at the time. And I would take them down to him, and then he started writing Moridin. And I stopped taking them down in person. He was in character. So we worked through email after that, even though we were only a floor apart.
And he pointed out, he said this before, but it's useful for those of you who are writing. And I suspect many of you have this Weiss. Yes. He said, the reason he would come in character as the bad guy, everybody loves themselves. Nobody thinks he's a bad guy or a bad woman. They've been forced to do this by the misbehavior of others. And it's important to remember when you're doing character development. And so Jim would say, who's your favorite character? I mean, people would say, who's your favorite character? And he would say, the one I'm writing at the minute. It's, I think it's one reason his characters are so compelling, is that we recognize this very human quality of it.
Maybe there are questions?
Yeah.
Okay. And can we get microphones?
No.
Or project?
I think we'll have to show.
We will project.
I have lots of cough drops in my purse.
All right. Yes.
He has such an amazing take on the female perspective. I was wondering, did he come by that perspective just by observing the women in his family, including you, or would he come to you and say, I've got these two women here, how do they respond to each other? They're both in love with the same man.
The question is, that he had a wonderful perspective on his women characters, and did he just make it up from his own observations, or did he come to me with questions such as, how would two women feel in their own interactions if they're in love with the same man? He only asked me once about an interaction between women. And I gave him, it was about Elaine's, oh gosh, Elaine and her mother and I guess Tom Marilyn. She had a crush on Tom.
Right. So
And how, he said, how does this read? It's a mother and daughter who are both attracted to the same man. Do you think this reads okay? And it did, I thought. And we got an early fan letter after the Eye of the World, which never had an answer. It was sent to Tor Books, and Tor in those days was opening fan mail. And they sent the letter down without the envelope. There was no address, no return address on the letter. Remember that? Yeah. And the letters, it was from an MD in Florida who was a woman. And she said, you have answered the question that frightened Sigmund Freud. What do women want? She said, they want power, just like men. And he wrote from that perspective. Not that they were sexist, but that really the human heart has a lot in common for all of us.
But he was also very, very interested in every little detail that he didn't know about any subject, but women as well. And I think he had both Maria and me do very exhaustive research on what a woman goes through day by day in their pregnancy.
Yes, he did.
Now, maybe it's not all reflected in the books with Elaine and so forth, but you know, he felt the need to internalize that before he could write about it.
If we could use just a second, we've got a microphone.
Oh,
So we want to
you have
test
to
it.
put around. Hopefully
One,
this
two.
will solve some issues.
How's this in the back? We're on.
We're on. We're on.
One, two,
It's just not very loud. Well, it's better than now. We'll test.
Okay.
Another?
Other questions?
Emma?
Emma.
How did he write? Did he write all the point of views first, or yeah? How did he write his books by storyline, or by scenes, or
Chronology.
yeah, or yeah?
What have you-
I'm not sure.
I'm not either.
Because he would give me a full manuscript. Actually, he did it by chapter, I think.
Yeah.
As,
Because
yeah, when
He
you
would
start
set up
laying it
notes,
down.
lots of notes, but
Yeah.
then when he started writing,
Uh-huh.
he was going, this is the prologue, this is chapter 1, here's chapter
Okay.
2, oops, I made a mistake back in chapter 1, let's do that again.
Okay.
But you bring to mind, okay, Bob asked about his experience as a soldier, and I don't think any of us had picked up on it until, and Lise, thank you for all the notes you took, a magical evening, okay, when
Just
Jim,
don't say dragoon.
I won't, when Jim started spilling the last book to me, and Lise and Harriet were in the dining room in the next room. And when I realized what was happening, I said, "You've got to come." Because he had never done this. You know, he wrote, and then we saw it. But he never told us in advance. But where his experience as a soldier came in, and I don't think any of us recognized it until he was telling this story to us. And he gets to this wonderful last battle that you're all looking forward to. And he starts into it, and he says, "Oh no, it's too chaotic. I always write these on the fly." He knows who's going to be there at the beginning. He knows who's going to be standing at the end. But because of his experience in Vietnam, in the heat of it, he knew that there was no way you could say, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. As he started it, he put himself in it, and it just came spilling out.
That was one of the quotes from the books that plans, the best military plans end when the first arrow flies.
Right.
Oh.
Fog of Battle, I don't know, there was a chapter title in Path of Daggers. I can't remember if it was right. It was in all the Battle of Altera, but it was how, once you got in there, you couldn't really tell what else was going on. It was just your immediate area.
In the same vein, after one of our infamous fishing trips, and I wish that our oldest son, our youngest is about to graduate from college next month, so we can't have him here. But the oldest son loved fishing, if anything, maybe a little bit more than Jim did. So frequent, but threesome out fishing. And Jonathan was always a huge fan of the books, and it was the only guy I ever saw that could get away with criticizing, not just discussing, but I would never discuss the books with him when we were fishing, but Jonathan would go after him, "Why did you do this?" And I must tell you, there were several times I had to go, "Son, you're about to become chum." I think I would stop. So it was one of those, and we were done, we were back, and he asks him, he says, "So when you finish, what are you going to do?" All of us really love to ask that question. So he starts off with this narrative, this story. Jim told a few stories. So he starts with this story and he rambles on with it for half an hour. It was just amazing about this world with two civilizations that didn't really know each other existed, and how they developed on their own, and their culture and their history and their deities. One had a female deity, and on and on. And so Jonathan was sucked into it, and he says, well, you're done, just write it. And that's when he says, you realize how long I pondered, thought about, played with The Eye of the World, The Wheel of Time, before I put pen to paper. And it was 10 years of noodling it around in his head. Rand was not, the central figure was one guy, not this triumvirate of...
Well, Rand and Tam Althor were one character, one person. He was going to write it about a vet. And then he didn't.
And his name was Reese at the very beginning, not Rand. R-Y-S. Rand's name originally was going to be Reese.
Maria, tell the story about the cookie.
Should I?
And then I'm going to tell a story on her.
This one?
Which one first?
The black one.
The one you got in your hand.
Okay. Yeah. There was once Jim really wanted to figure out how to format something. And he was playing with it and couldn't get it to work. And he said, Maria, if you can make this work for me, I'll get you a cookie. So I went upstairs, noodled around a little while, got it done, went back and said, here it is. And he said, oh, thanks. Next day, I had a gourmet chocolate chip cookie this big around. Just wonderful. And unfortunately, he realized I liked them and he kept buying them. I gained about 15 pounds.
And then there was the day that Maria had brought in her household's pet rabbit for her son's show and tell at school. And because of the pressures on her workday, she brought the rabbit to the office and she introduced the rabbit to Jim and said, this is Carrot, which was the perhaps unfortunate rabbit's name. And the rabbit was a Carrot was a perfectly nice rabbit. And Jim said, oh, rabbit. I haven't had rabbit stew in so long. And he went on a little too long, and Maria drew herself up. As you can see, that's not very far. And she said, if you touch one hair on that rabbit's head, I will see to it that you can never find anything again. And you know I can do it. Jim told me this that evening, and I said, well, I think you deserved that. He was cowed.
I think the only time.
Wasn't Jim a vegetarian? That's a great story. The tree.
Oh, no, he was never a vegetarian, but I became one. I had to have heart surgery a bunch of years ago, and I read Dean Ornish's book, Vegetarian. And Jim he spoke about this and said I'd become vegetarian, and that he had been trying to adapt to a vegetarian diet, but that there was a delegation from the city, including the mayor, asking me please to give him some meat occasionally, because every now and again he would be found in the lower branches of a live oak tree, a tourist clutched between his jaws. I never saw it. It was a very unsightly moment as I was early in this practice of vegetarianism for health heart, and he had bacon on his plate, and I kind of wow. And we made a deal that just wasn't going to work. I just couldn't stand it. Couldn't wait till I was out of the kitchen before he cooked his bacon. And he was very good and did that. Any other questions? Yes. Over here.
Hi, it isn't really a question, I just wanted to share something with you briefly. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous talking about you guys. I was fortunate to go to a couple of his book signings, and he always said, oh, I'll only sign 2 books per person, which I don't think he actually ever did. But I just recall the last time I had met him, I had my newborn child with me in a stroller, and I had a whole bunch of books because I thought, oh, he never signs 2 books. But I didn't want to ask him to sign any more. So I gave him my 2 books, and I had my camera, and I'm one of these people, I don't want to bother people, so I said, can I take a quick picture? And he goes, sure. And then he's like, well, get in the picture. So he took the camera out of my hands, and he handed it to his assistant, and he said, take the picture, and then he saw that I had 2 more, or a few more books. He goes, give me your books, and he just signed them, and you could tell, that he was a sincere person. And I also thank all of you, because with everything that had happened, you shared yourselves with us, and I know we don't know you, but I thank you.
Thank you very much. That was lovely, and I can't possibly repeat it. I hope you all heard it. She was lovely. We had a funny time at a signing early on in England. We were up in, I think it's called the Rust Belt, the northern towns that are so depressed, in Nottingham, I think it was. And I got in the habit early on at book signings. I would pick a book, and I started at one signing and look forward to the next signing. It gave me something to do while he was signing books. And I'd ambled off to read whatever it was, and he told me after he'd left town that evening that a woman had come up with a stroller. That's what reminded me. And her baby in the stroller, and she got up to the table and said, and this is my son, Robert Jordan, whatever, Johnson. And I said, oh my goodness, well, I would have liked to have seen him. Why didn't you tell me while we were there? And he said, well, I thought you'd be kind of cross. And I said, how old is this baby? I said, well, that's okay. I know where you were 6 months ago. Whatever it was. A year and 2 months ago. And I told this to a friend who said, oh, Harriet, don't you believe it? We can do wonderful things with faxes these days.
Any other questions for the audience? Yes?
If Jim was fond of taking characters' roles, what was your favorite person for him to be writing? What did you most like to see him come in as a character?
Anybody nice. It was when it came in so dark, that was hard. But the funny thing was, every now and again, he would go out to a Charleston party with me. Because I would get sort of stir crazy. I didn't have a head full of all those people to talk to. And he would try and be polite, and he was sort of, but very quickly he'd back up against the wall, and his eyes would be sort of going on top of the crowd, and realized he was talking to his character. So we would leave early. And actually, it's done me in good stead as a widow, because I was used to going out on my own. When I needed company, I'd go see someone, and we were invited to a party and he didn't want to go, I'd go. So I learned to do that. Or a wedding. Yes?
Were there certain types of movies
He liked, were there certain types of movies he liked? Yes, he loved Zulu. He liked Braveheart very much. He didn't fancy The Patriot. He loved The Avenger, but he liked the ones with Anna Peel, Emma Peel in her cat suit best of all.
He had fondness for Vargas girls.
Yes, he liked Vargas girls' pinups too. But as for movies, The Prisoner. Yeah, mad for The Prisoner. And in fact, we went to Port Marion, which is a wonderful, real place in Wales. That's where The Prisoner was shot. And it's real. and really pretty. We've got so many tapes in the house. I'm pulling a blank.
The last movie he saw, don't know if he liked it, was 300.
Yes, 300.
Probably
He loved
should.
that. He loved it.
Yeah.
What's the one where it's the 300, but they're coming home from the Bronx? It's,
The Warriors.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
nice.
he was very fond of that. He liked Excalibur.
The original?
Has it been remade? This one would have been done, I think, in the 80s.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's the original. Yeah. Hitchcock.
Sharps, something or other.
Oh,
Oh,
Sharp. Yes.
Oh,
Which Marissa's inherited.
yeah. Good. It's yours. I just borrowed it. So, image is good.
The Dragoons.
Well, I liked it a lot. We saw Junebug, and actually we were in Atlanta, I think, when we caught up with that movie Junebug, which was really a very good piece of work. I thought so too. And like any professional, it was the quality of the writing of the movie. I mean, it was a fool for warriors.
Oh, another favorite. Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes, and you've seen him dressed up in his pirate get-up. He was Jack Sparrow. And we went out to the costume shop and was getting him extensions for his beard. And that night there were pretty ladies at the house, and one was putting eye makeup on him, and he said, "Could I have some more eye makeup?" And I said, "Nope." And we had a wonderful time at the party, where he stayed very much in character, and there was some guy in a really half-assed, insincere attempt at a pirate get-up. And he sidled over to him, and this guy was about as big as Jim. Looked at him like this, and Jim said, "A word, and I shall like ear, brother." And he said, "Next time, mascara." And then he sidled away. He was
Genuine qualities about the guy. If you didn't want to know what he thought, don't ask him. Because while he was genteel, he was going to be direct. If you asked him a question, you were going to get the answer.
And sometimes it was TMI, more than you really had meant to ask. Tough.
And he was a storyteller. So if you asked him the time, be prepared to listen to the construction of a watch. We're going to get it all. And it was, and I never wanted the story to end. But the other thing that I will mention is, even though he was like us, he was an adult, there was an endearing, childlike quality in Jim. And that's what you see reflected in the books. And you heard it from Alan. He had a 5 or 6 year old's inquisitiveness about things. He wanted to know why. And he would dig it out till he understood it. He wanted to know why something worked, why it was this way. Why does it have to be that way? Why can't it be this way? And that's some of the times when you're reading his stuff and you see, I never thought of it that way. It was because he did.
He was enormously generous. And, and I guess in a way it is part of that unspoiled child. And also he loved life and the world and found it absolutely astonishing in so many ways. And I think communicates those feelings very well in the books. Just, holy mackerel, it works that way.
Yeah.
And I loved it very dearly. My maid Maria dreams about him a lot, and my maid Ethel said, "Harriet, I dreamt about it last night." This was last week. I said, "Yeah, what happened?" She said, "Well, he was at his desk working, and I was went in and I saw him and I said, well, we wanted to go so-and-so, but I didn't have the money. So I guess we won't. And Jim said, let me see what I can do. And he looked at his computer and said, well, I can cover that and you can pay me back. It's $42. And she told me that the next morning. He said, so I'm going to play the number 42 today. And it didn't work. But he was, I mean, he's just all around us still. And I think we've run out of time. One more question?
Yes.
Any?
Emma.
Yes.
So, in the Wheel of Time, there's obvious parallels with mythology, and I was just wondering if there are any real-life characters that he put into the books. Like, for instance, I think maybe Francis Marion might be tied to Mac, so I was just wondering about that.
No, not directly. To the extent that a real-life character has become mythic, you could say there's a shadow in there. There was a real Francis Marion, the swamp fox, who drank a pint of vinegar a day. Matt does not drink a pint of vinegar a day.
But it's like his tactics and stuff that he used against the British. You know, Matt seemed to have that type of
So
mentality.
yes, and so did Mao used Francis Marion's tactics in the Chinese Revolution. He's in that way. And Jim picked up battles and tactics all over the place.
Thank you
Thanks.
folks for coming. Reminder that Harriet's going to be around and Wilson's going to be around for the next couple of days. And we have another panel tomorrow afternoon, Team Jordan, with Harriet and Maria and Alan and a couple of other folks, including Brandon, talking about writing a memory of life. And that is at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
I have no idea. Yes.